What's up,
There we
G?
are. What's going on, brother?
How you doing, man?
I'm good, man.
All right. So let's
How's
see.
how's my audio?
Audio's good.
Okay, awesome.
Audio is good. We're live on. Let's see. All right, perfect. I'm gonna send this link out to LinkedIn as well.
Woo, baby. You excited?
Man, I'm excited. Good way to start off the year and just kind of make some things happen. You know what I mean?
10-4. Absolutely, bro.
You've been busy, man. You've been doing some good stuff. So what kind of action are you seeing on your end?
Most of the action is just me going crazy about new ideas that I can't leave alone.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That planning toolbox thing was, I said, man, I think I need to do this, and able to do it. So far, the feedback's been awesome.
Nice. Perfect. Give me 1 sec. So
Are we live?
We will be in about 30 seconds. So have you used Restream before?
I have not. No, sir.
Okay. So like Restream, the way it works is normally it'll basically integrate with LinkedIn on that event. You know what I'm saying? And then
Got it.
Gets recorded and then basically kind of proceeds from there. So just give me 1 sec. There we go. I'm just trying to find the link to put it out there on the construction leadership side. Perfect. So it looks like we've got some people monitoring the stream, so we should be good to go.
Nice.
And then be all ready to rock and roll.
Love it.
Fix my fake hair there.
That's funny.
All right, perfect. So kind of the same deal. I'm going to start it off with us being like, hey, I've got Jesse Hernandez from Debt Builder, and I'm going to share just kind of like what our goal was with starting this live stream to talk about, and then kind of let you dive into some of the things that you and I mentioned, right? And then the questions that I sent you are just kind of the same thing as before, just sort of.
Look, they can hear us.
Yeah. The only thing that makes it hard is I can't monitor the chat at the same time.
I think we're good. Because I could see the chat on my end. I see Lance commenting. He said, "Fake hair, don't care."
Perfect. Well, since all our fans are on, let's start this rock show.
Let's do it.
So very excited to have you, Jesse, Debt Builder. First of all, you've been taking the interweb by storm, especially in 2024, right? Coming out with some great content, and especially with a lot of the newsletters and things like that. So for those of you that watched you on the podcast before, bring us up to speed on what are some of the things that you've been up to in the last few months, and how you're starting 2024 off the right way.
Oh man, so thank you, Nick, and awesome to be sharing time with you again, because we did like the podcast interview on your thing. Then we met in person here in San Antonio.
That's
And
right.
here we are again, live streaming.
Because the world wanted more of Nik Lahiri and Jesse Hernandez, and
Agreed, brother.
we give
Agreed.
the world what they want.
Dude, and then I was in California and totally dropped the ball on like hitting you
Then
up
you
to
broke Nick's
connect.
heart and didn't even contact. But Lance got some love.
You did.
Lance got. You guys
No,
had a
man,
great
but-
view in the background and everything. But anyway, so dude, you've been traveling. That's awesome. I mean, you've been around. You've been busy.
Yes, I have. So things have been awesome, man. Like closing up the end of last year was like the first full year of operating my business. And I've got plenty of backlog going into this year.
Yeah.
And so like the main thing that I've been focused on is what's it going to take? What skills do I need to learn? What network and connections do I need to build so that I can transition my business to do the most impactful things that I do? Like there's a lot of stuff that I can do, right? Song
Yeah.
and dance and sell feet pics and all that. But there's some stuff that I do that is like transformational.
Right.
But I spend the smallest amount of my time doing that. And so the nut I'm trying to crack is, how do I flip it? What do I need to learn to make that different? And so, I mean, heck, we're only 2 weeks into January and we're off to a sprint. I've been tinkering around with another online course. And then, like you said, just kind of getting around. I've had the fortune of being interviewed on a bunch of podcasts.
Nice.
And Lance turned me on to the idea of the dang newsletter. So we launched the newsletter, the weekly newsletter, Your Monday Morning Hugs. And really, bro, what's actually happening all the time is, have you seen The Matrix?
I have.
So that there's a scene where Neo, the first time, like they download learning into him, and he's like, I know Kung Fu.
Right.
That's how I feel, man. Like all the stuff that's going on, I have to learn. And you know this, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, you're running like a real big business with people, and like that's a whole other world, man. But like the rate at which I'm learning is nuts. Like just beyond what I ever thought it was going to have to be. So it's been amazing, bro. And then connecting like with amazing professionals like yourself, you just never know what can happen or what can come from putting yourself out there. And again, like you and I connecting, I think is a direct result of that.
Yeah. No, and obviously when we connected, one of our biggest goals, obviously at Essel Skilled Trades is, being able to provide a better resource that's beyond just what is state of the art, right? So other than personnel, what can we, how can we provide better support? And one of the most common things we always see in working with superintendents and foremen, throughout projects is we always try to be the thing they don't have to worry about, just because they have so many things they have to worry about, right? And so obviously with your experience and a lot of the new education pieces that you've come out with, and you coming up through the game in that capacity, right? I think it's one of our goals with this conversation was being able to provide some solid tools, literally and figuratively, for foremen and superintendents and future foremen superintendents that are going to get promoted this year, that are going to get hit with that proverbial wall right out of the gate, being like, boom, right? So in your experience, and as you've come up, I guess the first step would really be to just high level, what are the ways that you can help in some of these people as well as organizations to really prep them for a better, more efficient year in 2024 without sort of giving them a piece of their soul? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think that would look like?
I love the way you without the soul. That's gonna be hard, man.
Yeah.
No. I feel you, and I have at some point I'm probably gonna could change my messaging to make it seem like I did my whole career on purpose, but I didn't. I did it on accident. Right? I started off as an apprentice, as a plumbing apprentice, got my journeyman license, and done a bunch of things along the way, which has given me like special insight as to like the pains of transitioning from installer to foreman to superintendent, working for a trade contractor to a big, gigantic general contractor, and now running my own business. The thing, like particularly there's one big gigantic pain point for craft workers, installers, when they transition into the foreman or leadership role. And, I remember being a supervisor and superintendent, like, man, I wish these people would just plan better. But plan is a relative term, right?
Right.
Like, if you say plan, did you plan? Yeah, I planned. Oh, okay. Like, what exactly does that look like? And so that's a skill. That's a totally buildable skill. But the challenge for that I lived through going as an installer to becoming a foreman was, as an installer, I could see my progress every single day. At the end of the day, at lunchtime, I could turn around and say, man, I got some work done. Or damn it, I'm gonna have to pick it up because I'm not progressing like I want to.
Right.
And I was recognized for my individual contribution to the construction of the project.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like that. And so the space between applying effort and receiving gratification was very tight. Then I got into the foreman role.
Right.
And it's not the same. Like, my job is like, I'm not going to be rewarded or recognized for putting stuff in anymore. I need to be planning and laying a path for my team to be able to execute and do the work. And so for me, the hardest thing was coming to terms with delayed gratification. It was a longer period of time. So in terms of like thinking and psychology, I think bosses, we'll just call them bosses, the fancy shoes out there, what they could do is like just be aware of this transition that people are going through, going from installer to foreman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing that it seems like everybody went to the same school and said, hey, let's do it like this. And so what we do is we pick the installer that can install the fastest, the highest output rate. And then we say, shh, you are now a foreman, without equipping them with any tools to communicate, to listen, to plan, to understand budgets and estimates and all the safety. Like, there's so much, there's like a tremendous amount of responsibility coming into the foreman role that there's very little preparation. The companies could improve on preparing their foreman to
Right.
make that transition, give them the tools to be successful.
Right.
Now, going from foreman to superintendent, a whole new ball game, because now I got to learn a different language more, in that I'm kind of now the translator or communicator between the ivory tower and the field.
Right.
And learning how to do that it's like mental gymnastics, because nobody teaches you that. Like, there's no course that helps you do that. And now the time horizon that I need to be thinking through as a superintendent goes from, like, I was a foreman, so I needed to be thinking 1 to 2 weeks out, right? Because things are so crazy. I really don't have the bandwidth to think beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm a superintendent. I don't need to be thinking 1 to 2 weeks out. I need to be thinking 3 to 12 weeks out for multiple crews, for multiple teams, to be able to help them be successful and develop my foreman's capabilities. So the responsibility gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think rather what I experienced in my transition was, hey, you're pretty good, promotion. And then took me 2 or 3 years of being horrible as a foreman. And they said, man, you're pretty good, another promotion. And I sucked again for 2 or 3 more years. And like, the mechanisms to help people develop those skills and make those transitions, they're completely absent, or at least from what I lived through, right? I'm not saying there ain't no companies doing the right thing, but there's a lot of room for improvement. And that's kind of one of the focal points that I've always had, because I lived the pain, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So, for example, in retrospect, when you were, just coming in as a foreman, and you mentioned 3 or 4 years of kind of figuring it out, was that, looking back at that career, is that what prompted you to kind of take that knowledge and turn it into almost like a, education course on like the field leaders toolbox? Like, is that, and if so, what are some things that are nuggets that you talk about, where it's like, if you were talking to 1,000 foremen right now that are about to be promoted in Q2 of this year, You know, what
Yeah.
is that? What are those things where you can tell them, hey, you got to start preparing for this stuff, and this is how? What would that look like?
Yeah, man. Thank you. So, like, the conversation you and I had, the very first interview you and I had, I went back and rewatched it.
Yeah,
And we were talking a lot about, like, what would you suggest to a foreman? And I'm listening, I'm like, oh wow, like that seemed valuable. You seemed really interested.
yeah,
And then I said, huh, I lived that life. I wonder how I could share it. So back in the day, I did it just to make my life better. And then when I got promoted, I worked for a company. It was a profit. We had a profit sharing program. And so if I made money on more money we made on the project, the more money I personally got.
mm,
So that was my motivation to, like, let me figure this out and teach my team different things so that I could make more money. And it was purely like selfish, right? Um, Eventually I got to the point where I was like, oh, I could, like, help improve people's quality of life. Well, then fast forward 20 years, you and I have the conversation. I'm rewatching the live stream and I'm like, I haven't taught weekly work plans, long-term planning, escalation of constraint. I haven't taught that in 10 years. It's still relevant and it's still valuable. And so it was that. And I said, okay, what if I packaged all that stuff that I was doing back then? Because the number one thing that helped me go from, like, burning out and drowning and suffering and struggling was the way I started planning. There were a lot of things that came after that, but it was kind of like, if I just like, in my head, I just work hard and continue working hard and I'm going to get through it. But that was like a never ending battle. When I started just writing down my plan, what do I want to do? What do I want my crew to do next week? What am I going to need to get that done?
yeah,
And how many days do I think we should take to get it done? All of a sudden, the chaos started settling down, and that created space for me to learn new stuff.
right.
It was just that. So then I learned another thing about planning and another thing about thinking further into the future and like translating my estimates into a form that I could figure out precisely how much we should be installing per hour in order to make that bonus that I was after.
Yeah,
So it's all of that. Like, okay, what can I package in the field leaders planning toolbox that other people can sit down and watch, super short, super quick, and start doing right now, that'll alleviate a lot of the pain that they're experiencing and help them make that transition or that big leap that they're actually experiencing right now. That
nice.
makes sense?
Yeah, no, totally. So with the program, and I was looking through it kind of a little bit last night. What are the key tenets of it? So I know planning is a big part of it, right? What are the other sort of nuggets or pillars that it's sort of built on?
Yeah. So the there's an obvious one, and then there's the hidden one that kind of
Mhm.
comes along with it. The obvious one is planning, right? Like getting specific, planning your week. There's a lot of detail around how I recommend we do our weekly planning. The next piece is, okay, after we've executed the work, now what? Like, the plan doesn't always go as planned, it changes. And so
Right.
how do we learn from that and make it better, not just for me and my team, but also for the company? So there's that piece. So there's this continuous learning that's involved in that. Um, and as a result of doing that, we start developing. So there's communication, right? And once you identify what the constraints are and start communicating them up to get the resources and support that you need to go and execute the plan better next time, you start developing this skill of communicating up, not complaining and blaming, but saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is the help I need." And so clarity and communication. After that, when we get into 6-week look ahead, long-term planning, it's really about, okay, let me detach from the urgency of what I'm living through right now and think through what we know inevitably is going to happen. So expanding a person's time horizon, and then there's some other preparatory stuff, but fundamentally it's around planning and a way to plan with some tools to like frame that for you. The other thing is the continuous learning, like as a foreman or superintendent, but more importantly, as an individual, because using and practicing these things helped me build the bandwidth to continue in learning to stay on the path that I'm on right now, right? So I was a plumbing foreman. It doesn't make sense for me to go and be a regional leader for the biggest dang general contractor in the country. That doesn't, there's not a straight line. It was because I learned how to plan, learned how to communicate, learn how to learn from whatever I tried and make it better the next time. It was those principles that like skyrocketed me to the place that I'm at now. And as simple and boring as it might sound, it really just comes down to getting the plan out of your head, putting it on paper, sharing it, communicating it with the people that like the relevant people, and then reflecting on the damn thing and learning what to do next time.
Right. So one thing, Jesse, you mentioned, in this process, as someone progresses through their career, it's safe to say that a lot of times they have an indication that, hey, we're going to be, putting you in a foreman position or superintendent, whatever it might be. Can you talk to a little bit about how they can utilize the assistance or the leadership of their project managers or existing superintendents or general superintendents? Because one of the things that I know you've touched on in the past is learning, obviously, but then also it seems like there's also some opportunities to ask for help of just, hey, tell me what as you're planning this week out or you're looking at the schedule, asking questions and being curious about what are you looking at here, right? Like, what are the things that are concerning for you? Because a lot of times, it just seems like as an organization, everyone is so nose to the pavement, but it's one of those things where people asking these questions, like, what are you really looking at here, can also help educate them on from a superintendent's perspective, from a project manager's perspective, right? So it's kind of like, so what can a future up and coming leader, right, foreman, superintendent that's going to get promoted this year, they just don't know it yet,
right?
But
They are,
and they're thinking, man, I've been doing the same thing, I'm ready for the next step, but when's it going to come? Sometimes asking these questions helps signal to the higher ups, be like, hey, that person, they're asking some real good questions, right? That person has the aptitude, the fact that they have the aptitude to even ask these questions. So in that capacity, could you share on what that dynamic, how someone could use that dynamic to their advantage, if you will, to try and figure out how to prep them and get some of these questions in a real life scenario?
Yes, absolutely. And so this was my experience. I started planning and I would write down my plan and then I would get pissed off at everybody because I couldn't stick to my plan, right? I had to deviate because life happens, especially on the job site. And so what I learned, like I would have a nice plan detailed, I'd have all the resources coming so I could start that task on Monday or those multiple tasks on Monday. And then the GC would come and say, hey, I need you to work on this. I'm like, but I'm planning on doing this. He's like, okay, I need you to work on this. And I'd lose my mind, right? Cuss and scream. So then I said, well, that happened a couple of times. I said, okay, this isn't working. So then I started doing it. So it was a little shift, but huge. Instead of just planning in a vacuum, right, in Jesse land and getting frustrated on Monday or Tuesday, like I did the past 2 weeks, I'm going to write down my plan on Wednesday before Monday. And I'm going to go sit down with the superintendent or the project manager with the GC and say, hey, this is what I'm planning on working on next week. Right. What do you think? Well, we need X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay, what if and so that's where I'm going to call it a negotiation because it's like, ooh, man, like that's way out in left field. Not what I expected. I haven't even done the takeoff on that. Right. But what if I could start on that like Wednesday? Like, oh, okay, if you could start any sooner, right? They always say sooner. And so all of a sudden, and it wasn't necessarily that my plan was the answer. It was the action of saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Does it align with what you're thinking? Yeah. Right. In most cases back then, that's what I was experiencing. And that practice is like universal in any relationship, in any industry, right? Whatever you're thinking, what your plan, objective, even interdepartmentally, share your idea and thought and plan with the people that it's going to affect, or the people that are going to interact with it. Because
Right.
they can inform you of like, oh, you're a little bit off, a little wonky. What if we did this? And then you can get something that everyone is in agreement with.
Yeah.
So reminds me of David Verbal, one of my coaches. He's like, Jesse, a plan without agreement is a wish. Like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. So it was that. It was simply that, hey man, this is my plan. What do you think? And in some cases, especially now, I feel like more and more general contractors are getting more collaborative in terms of the way that they plan and engaging
Right.
the trades. And so they're out of the gate saying, this is our target. What's it going to take to make that happen?
Right.
Okay, let's think through that. But going back from the foreman perspective, it really was saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Like, do you see any problems with that? And then we
Yeah.
could align, and my temperature, my blood pressure stayed kind of even after that for a little while. Is that
Yeah.
helpful?
Yeah. No, definitely. So it's kind of like being able to, you know, obviously the main message I take from that is sort of, you can't work in a silo, right? You might
Right.
have it's kind of like, it's funny. Um, I heard the quote in my head where it's like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? So it's kind
Yes.
of like on the construction site, a person may have a plan, but they're like, the superintendent's got another thing coming on Monday morning. And if you don't have the sign off or the sign, buy off on that happening Monday morning, you're thinking you're going to do this. Be like, no, you're not. Boom, go over there. And then all of a sudden it
Yes.
becomes like, oh man, they don't care what I have to say. But you can prevent all that by being able to make sure, understand this is just the way it is. You got to be
Yep.
able to pull the people in together. I think that's such a great quote that you mentioned, that the planning without agreement, right? What
Yep.
was that quote again that you just said that
Yeah.
David mentioned?
A plan without agreement is a wish.
Right,
It's
right.
like, oh shit,
I
yeah.
think I think that's my wife's favorite quote too, actually, now that you mention it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, so that's great. So that sets the tone, right? It gives someone some understanding when they're on a job site. How can they get that agreement? Who are the key stakeholders they need to get their agreement from, right?
Yes.
And then be able to provide that. In your experience, when you have been faced with a direct, no, you're not. That's not part of the plan, but that it kind of needs to be because the way you're being not compensated, but what you're being judged on
Yep.
is you getting this part done, but you need the buy off. Like, what are some things that you've learned and I'm sure handling things the right way as well as looking back and lessons learned. Like,
Yeah.
what are some of those tips that you have so that people don't go scorched earth?
Yeah. Yeah. So so I'll give a bad example, but there's some value in it. I worked on this one project. It was actually the very first data center I ever worked on 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was. And they had a superintendent who would come to me it was like every day. Anytime he saw me, oh, I need you to come over. Like it was, oh, I need. And I would send somebody. And then it was like they weren't ready. Other people were in the way. And I said, okay, this ain't going to work. I'm killing my budget is going to blow, right? I need to do something differently. And so what I started doing was I would say, yes, I'll get on it today. And he'd back off. And so then I'd go and talk, like go see the area, and I talk to the other trades, like, hey man, when are you gonna be done? How long are you gonna And they'd say, man, like tomorrow, I'm gonna be in here all day. We're working late trying to get done. If you come in here, you're gonna slow me down. All right, cool. If you're done tomorrow, I'll hit you up, and then I'll come in right after you. And so what I would do is I would say, yes, we're gonna jump on it right now. And then I'd go talk to the guys, the installers for like the other trades to find out the truth. And then I would get on it. Sometimes they're like, dude, we don't need that space for a week. Cool. Because for me and my budget, it was extremely expensive to stop what I was doing or stop
Yeah.
my team from what they were doing here, remobilize them over here, go crazy trying to get material and equipment, and then they're standing there waiting to do the work. So I said, I'm going to take that piece out and say yes, and then get everything on order, smooth the path for my team. And once the path is smooth, then I'm going to move them. because
Right.
the worst thing you can have is loose ends, and that's what was happening. They're creating a bunch of loose ends. He eventually caught on. He's like, "Hey man, I told you about X, Y, You just say yes, and like nothing's happening anywhere." I said, "No, but here's my plan. Here's what I'm gonna." Yeah, but I told you I need them this day. I said, "I know you did, but let's go over there. There's still the bricklayers waiting on whatever, the electrician, the gear got delayed. Like if I go, I'm gonna be in their way." He was
Yeah.
pissed, but he understood. So the bad part about that is I was lying and saying yes. But what I used to do is fight with them. "You're not even ready." That doesn't help.
Yeah.
So I think the takeaway is like me kind of learning how to respond appropriately to an unreasonable request in the moment help me maintain the relationship, one, and two, help me find a way to be way, way more productive with my team.
Right.
Because if I would have said, "Hell no, we ain't doing that," the last time you called me up, there was no emergency and my guys were laying around, he's not going to say, "Oh, yeah, you're right." He's going to send an email to my office, and my office is going to say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And
Right.
so it was that little but big shift that helped me again be more productive and maintain a steady state of mind.
Yeah. No, that's great. You know, it's interesting. We were just going over on our sales side some training, and one of the things that we're mentioning is as soon as you get an objection, and in this case, it's not really an objection, it's more of a request or
Yep.
you know, a direction. And it's sort of like you empathize, you ask, and then, or you empathize, you answer, and you ask the question. So in this case, the way I kind of see it is I would imagine the foreman, the superintendent that's giving you the orders, they may not have done their entire due diligence of knowing all the steps that are in the way.
Right.
They're assuming that it's all going to be taken care of because they just need you to handle your part. By you saying, "I'm going to handle it," you empathize with them. You can communicate to them that your priority is my priority. I'm going to get on it. But then you're doing your due diligence and finding out with the rest of the team of, is this going to be done? Am I going to be in your way? Or are you going to be in my way? Things like that.
Yep.
And then you're sort of answering on the back end, you know, letting them know that it's not going to happen today because X, Y, and Z. But I would imagine that they would see that your answer is built around facts and current state of the situation, which they may not have had a chance to do. Right. So
Absolutely.
these sorts of skills in communication, it seems like a lot of times, you know, is almost like the wrong way to communicate is such a big liability in the sense. And we've on our side seen it in a couple of different ways, very smaller scale, but it's like the project executive calls us, hires us, and says, "Hey, we need your punch list team. Got 200 units. We're going to be behind schedule, all these other things." The thing that they don't forget, we always ask is, you know, are all the trades done? Things like, yeah, every single unit's ready to go. We're good. You only need 3 people. We got the material, all these other things. And then we show up and it's literally polar opposite from what they just described. Right.
Yep.
And we try to use that lesson of just like same thing of we wish we'd have confirmed with the superintendents, confirmed with the partners that, you know, all these other things. But and lo and behold, our teams show up ready to work on and get these units done, and they're still doing drywall in the last 50 units, or they're still doing all this repair that, you know, that's going to basically make the unit dirty and have to refinish a lot of things
Do it again. Yep.
all the time. And then same thing is once we actually get to that point, being able to get the buy off from everybody being like, you cannot once this has the tape on the front door, like you cannot go in there.
Yep.
Like, do not. And if you need something, you got to come to super and ask, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of like being able to understand that despite being a service provider, you can still get the information. And instead of taking it at face value, you can still get the information from the rest of the team, bring it back to the person that's making the request without seeming combative, like you're not trying to do what they're asking you to do, and let them know, hey, just so you know, I spoke with the superintendent. They mentioned they're not even close to being done in these units, and then being able to, you know, kind of execute from there, right? So that communication style is or understanding how to communicate in that style to be able to pull everything together, the planning, the, you know, objections and things like that, such a critical piece. In your experience, what role do you see, for example, with the planning and things like that, have you seen a lot of the products or new technology that help with that, like Procore and their different modules and like the different construction management tools that it seems like a lot of companies are using for new foremen, superintendents kind of coming up in the game and being promoted this year? Do you see the technology and construction technology playing an important role in helping with some of these things, or
Oh,
is it still a lot of manual processes?
no. I see there's a ton. First, there is a whole host of options
Mm-hmm.
in terms of technology that the field, and when I say field, I'm talking about trade foreman, trade leadership,
Right,
that is designed to help them and optimize their performance.
right,
One big problem, though, is the design of that software is not necessarily targeted at solving the pain point of the foreman.
right,
It's
right.
targeted at solving the pain point for their bosses.
Mm,
And so that creates a natural rub between the foreman actually using it and what management wants out of it, right? So that creates a significant gap. Another big gap is, yes, there's a lot of freaking software out there, a lot of great products out there, but if the foremen, the field leaders out there don't have the devices
mm-hmm.
to access and actually leverage that software, you got a problem. And what I mean by that is everybody's got a smartphone now. But trying to do scheduling and planning on a damn iPhone, that's a pain in the butt, right? Like the company should be spending money to get them iPads or the general contract. And I know somebody personally in Dallas that they made the investment and bought a dozen iPads and they equipped their foremen on that site, like their trade contractors. They loan them the iPads to use the software that they're working with, like collaboratively as a group working through. They
Yeah,
provided training for them. They walked them through it, and they provided them the best devices so that they could get the actual value out of the thing. So that being said, yes, there's a lot of stuff out there. One easy one, like it sounds silly, but the camera on your phone, we didn't used to have that back in the day. We used to have to carry like a little digital one with memory cards and stuff. You got it on your phone now.
yeah,
Video, you can take video. You got a notes app, your calendar app. Like, I know that sounds basic, but that is technology and it can transform a foreman's performance by using those things. You got the notes app. And then there's, again, there's so many. And because like I'm nerdy that way, I like to try all kinds of different stuff. Procore is a really great app and it's like the big, gigantic one out there in the market. But the assumption, like the app is good, the software is good, the technology is great. And there needs to be a mechanism to equip the trade leaders
mm-hmm.
with the knowledge base and the devices to actually reap the value that people are trying to get from all of that stuff. So I'm totally for it. And I'm also not going to let it get in my way. Like I remember when lasers came out, which were pretty awesome. I had a young apprentice. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, you're supposed to be installing hangers. Why aren't you installing hangers? Oh, I'm waiting on batteries. I'm like, batteries for what? Well, for my laser, because he was transposing marks up on the ceiling. I said, well, dude, you don't need freaking laser. Get your plumb bob, fool. Like, we've been building stuff for centuries, man. We didn't need lasers to get it done. And so my point is technology is amazing, but it's not it's not a license to not get the damn job done if you don't have it.
Right, right. So in that kind of same capacity with technology, planning, and all these things, can you give us a perspective on from a foreman standpoint or even a superintendent standpoint? How does a labor, when someone's identifying where they might need assistance in terms of additional labor, whether it's general labor, cleanup, and things like that, or additional support for skilled trades personnel, like when does is that usually happen on a construction project on a consistent or a weekly basis, or where they're looking at their sort of output and their personnel and where they might have some gaps? And if so, then what are some best practices that companies can do to have better workforce planning, on their projects?
Oh man, Nick. Yeah. And I appreciate and feel for you in the business that you're in, because I can only imagine how thankless it is at times. Because I was on the opposite end, right? When I was running labor for the company I was working with back in the day, I dealt with um what's the right word?
Yeah,
uh
I mean,
Labor services,
labor
right?
staffing. Yeah,
And I'll tell you how I started. And it was always, I need 6 people. Hey, I need you to find them somewhere else to go. I need them back. Right. And or they're horrible. You said they were going to be great. They suck. They don't have blah, 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 blah. Right. And so that didn't help anybody. It didn't help the labor provider. It sure as hell didn't help me. And so in terms of like, what did I do to make that situation better is I had to get clearer about, and so this is the recommendation, right? If you're out there, you got like, let's just start at the beginning. Nobody gets a big giant project from one day to the next, right? You might be getting the notice to proceed or the hurry up, start tomorrow, one day to the next, but that damn thing, you've been talking about it for months and months and months and months.
right,
And so what we did was we had, like, super generic. I had a 6 weeks, like this big long-term spreadsheet. I would list out the projects that we had, and also like pursuits that were high probability of like being awarded. And I would load manpower. I mean, hell, you could do this on a damn whiteboard. And I understand how much labor I need to execute this project at this point in time for the next 9 months. And that's going to kind of go up and it's going to come down. And I got this other projects in it. So I would just visualize all of that. And then I'd have my potential projects, 60, 80%. They were like, for real, for real, for real, going to do it. And I would put down the head count of the people we think it's going to take or that we've budgeted for it. And then I would add, like, I know it sounds sarcastic, but for real, I would add each column each week and say, okay, that's 90 people. How many how many people do we actually have? 72. I'm going to need 18 in 3 weeks.
Mm.
Now, those 18, what do I need? Do I need sheet metal mechanics? Do I need pipe fitters? Do I need a backhoe operator? Do I need general labor? And then I could get super specific. And then
right,
I could call Nick and say, hey, Nick, I got this situation, man. I got this project that we're going to be receiving equipment for like a whole week. I need a super experienced freaking reach forklift operator with certificates and all that good stuff in 2 weeks. I don't need them tomorrow. I need them in 2 weeks.
right,
And I'm going to need 2 or 3 people. I need a signal person, and I'm going to need 2 people to just general move things around, uncrate, and get rid of the trash. Can you hook me up with that team?
right, right.
When I was able to do that, especially like, and I wish I would have thought, you and I were talking about this at breakfast at one time. Had I thought about that, like if I think about how disruptive a delivery is, and depending on the type of work that you do, but I was in the mechanical contractor space. So equipment delivery, fixture delivery, sheet metal duct delivery was so disruptive because my install team had to stop installing to receive all of the junk, unload it, or place it.
Right.
And had I had my brain on back then, I would have acquired some temporary, like a hit team, right? A super awesome hit team. Hey, can you come do this? Because you know what? In San Antonio, I was doing that 3 or 4 times a month. And I could have just had them bouncing around
Yeah.
doing that while my install team was still installing. So I guess in summary, what I would recommend is write down your projection. If you don't have a spreadsheet, I mean, we had a pretty cool software. I don't remember what it's called anymore, where we could upload all that information and play around with projections, and it made it super fast. But if you don't have that, use a spreadsheet. Excel, it works. And if you don't like Excel, get you a whiteboard and start scribbling and just think it through, and it'll give you a projection and help you see how many people do I need, how many do I have, and I can start making those calls sooner, which always meant the quality or the caliber of the individuals I got was always better. The more lead time I gave my labor services to acquire me those people, the better those people were able to actually perform. Would you have liked me if I did that?
No, I was just gonna say, what's interesting is that the projects, like you mentioned, I think for us is we understand our job is to be silent and provide the people. As long as if you don't hear back from the clients about, they don't have time to call you and say, hey man, great freaking job. They'll call you and say, what the hell is going on, right? So if you
Yes.
don't hear anything, you're good. We have our reps check in. But what we find is a lot of times what we're trying to shift towards is obviously the $1 billion companies that are the day labor companies that are just like people ready, like, hey, we need
Yep.
bodies, we need person here. What we find is there's definitely projects that need a lot of that, which is great. But then where we are trying to approach it is to get in that planning side and say, hey, your project is about to break ground in 28 days. Do you already have the general labor, a cleaner, etc.? And then when we have that time to be able to identify at what point in the schedule they're going to need additional help, it is then our job to check in as we get closer to be like, are you still thinking this many people for this long? Right.
Yes.
Because then we have the time, because at the end of the day, what I always tell our clients when they call and say, hey, look, it's not like we have this magical warehouse of skilled trades personnel just sitting there and waiting to be called out to the work job sites, right?
Right. Nobody does.
Nobody does. Exactly. Like all the best people that are on the jobs that are in demand, they're in demand and they're working, right? So, but if we know that in 4 weeks, we're going to need 10 people here for six weeks or whatever, that planning aspect, we are willing to do that value added, planning and organization and scheduling upfront, because we know the end result ends up being a much better output for the client and much better result for everybody across the board. Right now,
Yeah.
our recruiting teams are still one of the best is putting together what the project needs when we need it. But when anytime we have that planning up front, that time, then we can really even go visit the site, make sure
Yes.
everyone's familiar with where's all the material stored, here's what they're going to need. And obviously one big thing is that hit team for the punch list that we have. But a lot of times, someone will say, don't worry, they have everything you need right on site. And then when we get on site as a job walk, just 2 days before it starts, we find out that all the material they have is basically excess material from the subs. And so we're going to run out of that day one. And I
Yep.
remember one of the biggest things you mentioned was doing material runs to the warehouse or the shop is the
Yes.
biggest sort of efficiency killer. So now we can run out right out of the gate and say, hey, we're going to need way more of this type of material
Yeah.
within 2 days, or we can just go get it, expense it. But at the end of the day, I can tell you right now, it's like that's going to set us back right out. But that planning part is so invaluable. But a lot of times we are, the service providers are sort of unfortunately an afterthought, and like you mentioned, the OSHIT moment, and then they get on the phone and say, "Send me these people right now," and
Yeah.
sometimes, a lot of times we're telling them like, "Look, the skill set you want in terms of how fast you want them, you're not going to get 100% right now, just because like I don't want to put my name behind somebody that we haven't vetted, we haven't tested out, and they're just sitting at home." Watching Jerry
Yes.
Springer, like, yeah, I'll take the job on, no big deal. Like, I can't do that. Right. So I'm like, I can get you someone who can do X, Y, and Z. And then if you give me, for that perfect fit, just because there's nothing worse than thinking that you have someone that's going to move this thing forward for you. And they just don't.
And
Right.
it makes it worse. But
Yeah.
y'all have also taken on like some pretty, I saw your post on the TikTok, like some pretty massive situations out across the country even, yeah?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that
I mean,
easy?
that's how what's interesting is that's how we really understood that we have a special set of skills of the technical side, hurricanes, wildfires, train derailments, like all of the technical projects that need a high level of personnel to respond to accomplish that goal of cleanup or whatever it might be. That's why we see so many sort of similarities between projects like that and in construction, is
Yeah.
just because of the fact that in projects where you've got environmental contamination, you've got, buildings, communities burned down, no one has time to F around, right? No one
Right.
has time to deal with people that don't have PPE, don't have experience. And so it's a different level of expectation where if you're coming to play, like you better be ready, right? And so
Absolutely.
coming from that environment has helped us in making sure bring that same mindset into construction, to be able to say that, hey, superintendents, project managers, you have a better option than just day labor option. For a lot of options, day labor might be great. 1 or 2 days, they get
Yep.
paid out, end of the job, all good. But where we're bringing in is like a lot of the team members that have experience in the vettedness, right?
And
But
they've
yeah,
worked together
that's what
before.
it is. What's that?
And they've worked together before.
And they've worked together before,
That's
right?
huge,
Because a lot
man.
of and this also is connected. Obviously, one of the things we talk about as an industry is just the workforce and how we're gonna, have people, enough people for these jobs. What we find a lot of times is people that get started in construction have a great 5-10 year career, but they're either burned out and they're looking for something else, um, or they felt like they never got the support they needed to truly
Yep.
go up the ladder, right? They never got that experience. They never got that education, that mentoring, whatever it might be. And so then they try a completely different industry, but it's still a project-based environment, still execution of, an outcome, right?
Yep.
So a lot of similarities are the same. And that's really where we got our first shot. Was our client, one of our clients we did some environmental work for, was mentioning how hard of a time they're having with an existing national provider in just cleaners showing up on a regular basis, just doing the job that it's like straightforward. And we're like, oh, like, why don't you let us take a crack at that? We have some people that have worked with us for 3 years straight and never seen a wildfire and all these other things. And I'm like, I'm almost positive we can do a better job, but I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, right? Give a chance with you guys, and if they do well, then we can expand. And that client's been with us, kind of ever since. But that's
Wow.
exactly right. People have been vetted, they're being sent out, and because we can tell them this is the projects they've worked on, here's what they've done, versus just a body, and then letting them kind of deal with whatever happens, even the
Right.
onboarding and everything else. So yeah, so it's a lot of similarities in that capacity for sure as a service provider, seeing it all happen. And that's what obviously prompts this discussion of being like, man, instead of just witnessing this train wreck that happens a lot, and same thing is you see the impact it takes. I mean,
Yes.
I can't even tell you, like, obviously after everyone goes home in the trailer and you're just chatting with someone, and I'm an owner, but I'm also a sales guy, right? So I like
Yep.
to just chat it up. And I'm like, dude, I was like, this job looks like it's a crazy. He's like, yeah, I've got another 3 hours of paperwork right now. Then I got to drive another 2 hours home. And I'm just like, oh my
Yes.
God, it's 4 o'clock. He's like, yeah, I got to go through the time cards, upload them, and da da da. And I'm like, and you live 2 hours away? He's like, yeah, I live up in, and I'm like, he's like, and I'm back here at 5 a.m. tomorrow,
Yep.
and you just kind of feel for him just because it's like, but at the same time, one of the posts that you made was just about the dashboard, right? The dashboard of life events, divorces,
Yep.
whatever. It's like you feel for guys like that, but it's all in a lot of ways. Those are the people that make this industry what it is, of just making it happen,
Yeah.
and sure, like in a lot of ways, it's at what cost, but that mentality with some support, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's just amazing to see when you can find some way to help them out
Yeah.
where they can take off an hour or two earlier and just get
Dude,
all
and so that's what drives me, man. Like, yes, the folks that we have in our industry are some dedicated, hardworking, crazy fools, right? Like they sacrifice a lot to accomplish the things that are accomplished out there on the job sites. Um, and that's taxing, right? Mental health, substance abuse, like all of those things are symptoms of the amount of sacrifice that the men and women are making out there. What drives me is a lot of the stuff that I'm teaching and putting together, like webinars and training, and now some online products, is to help get them an hour a day back. Because that hour it's an hour, bro. Like getting home before the sun goes down is a big deal. Getting an extra hour of sleep is a big deal. Getting to see your family when they're awake is a big deal. And that's like my focus. Like, what can I do? What have I learned over the years, the hard way or the easy way, mostly hard, that I can pass on and share so that people can have an enhanced quality of life? Like, how
Yeah.
can I help them like continue kicking butt and enjoy a little bit more about life, because we're missing it. Like, I was there, I was running, redlining all the time, got a couple of divorces, I've got a bunch of arrests that they're all alcohol related. So substance abuse was how I coped. And it doesn't have to be that way. The part of how I got through that was doing the things that I'm now teaching or trying to teach people to do.
So Jesse, and as we kind of come close to the end here, what are some tools? I feel like there's almost like you need to do a course, and if you do this course, I need 10% up front. Okay. Is how to educate the managers and the companies to be able to provide that. You know what I'm saying? Like, as an employer, a lot of things are on my shoulders in terms of whatever happens, good or bad. If it's good, it's the employee's credit. If it's bad, it's the employer's fault. I fully own that.
Yep.
But in an environment like construction, what are some of the things that a company can do to identify, I need to provide support, I need to provide, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot
Yes.
of times it's the expectations that are coming down from, I would imagine, project executives and estimators that promise the earth and the moon to the clients, right?
Yep.
And then their mindset is, hey, they'll get it done. So if you were talking to 5,000 GCs right now, right, of
Yes.
like how to be a better, not just a grinder, but a better resource to help identify the people, and saying when you like, here's the support you need and things like what are some advice you have for organizations and management to be able to start to think about this as well and start to incorporate it into their culture as well
Yep.
as the way they look at employees?
So this is like old advice, Nick. Right? Everybody starts a business and their first like, oh man, we just need to sell. And let's talk about construction. I'm a new trade partner. I'm a new general contractor in a new market, and I'm trying to like make a way in there. I did a project, and because I'm so damn focused, man, we kick butt. And so now I start getting credibility in the market, and so my volume, my revenue, my backlog starts growing.
Right.
Well, here's the simple one piece of the advice. As your revenue grows, your systems need to grow with it.
Hmm.
And now let's dive into this system idea. Selling and securing or procuring work is one part of it. Then there's the people, and it can be simple math. If I'm doing $20 million of revenue a year, I'm probably, depending on what kind of trade I'm at, and like it's just straight up construction, not service, I probably am operating with somewhere between 15 and 25 people, installer all the way to VP or whatever, right? So if that's 15 to 25 people per 20 million, and next year's goal is to go up to 25 million, I need to increase this group of people by 5% or 20%. Now, it's not just a matter, so that's one part of the advice. How are you scaling your capabilities and your skill set within your organization? Does it match the scale of revenue that you're generating, right? Or that you're chasing? Now, of that percentage of growth, what are the skill sets that we need to continue to deliver service that people are going to continue to want? You got to answer that question. So there's one chunk. Now, what does it take to build that skill set? Because here's the misstep. We just need to hire more people. We just need more talent. We just need more experience. All the talent and all the experience in the world, you put them in a bad system, they're going to suck too. And
Right.
so what is the system to acquire, not just acquire, but to get that talent, that experience,
Yeah.
and integrate them into the way you function, into the way you do business in a predictable time period? Clearly said is, what's the damn training program that you use to brainwash the people that are coming into your organization to do things the way you do them? And what I feel like you get that in place and do math as you continue to grow and scale your revenue and your backlog and all these other things, grow and scale the different roles and departments within your business.
Right.
Like it's that. I mean, I'll say, and then the last big chunk, and Wesley Baker, one of my mentors, and still confidant friend, is it takes tremendous discipline.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is if you're the decision maker, you're out there in BD and you're selling work, you're trying to grow the business, it's your business to say no to the wrong clients. That's important. The
Right.
second piece is if your goal was to grow revenue by 20%, and there's an opportunity to get that big, sexy project that's got a tower crane that you can put your name on and all that stuff, and that takes you to 40% growth, say no, joint venture, or what the hell are you going to do to go and get those people, integrate them to your system to continue delivering the service you've always delivered. Is that
Right.
helpful?
Yeah, no, definitely, because that what you're mentioning is a lot of what we see on the back end. You know, when we're trying to hire a superintendent for a company and things like that. There's the ones that have been through a lot are able to ask the questions about a lot of the little things, you know, in technology,
Yep.
resources, what's available to us, and things like that. Because a lot of those questions are based around company might say all the right things, but when it comes, like you mentioned, something as simple as get your foreman the iPad so they can operate their software. You know, a company might say we're cutting edge technology, giving our people all the things they need. But an iPad, no, I don't think we need an iPad. We could get through with a cell phone. Why? Just to save that $500. But then that iPad can increase efficiency and all these other things. But someone is caught up with just the cost of
Yeah.
$500 an iPad.
$100.
$5,000 for what? Like,
Yeah.
they can do it on their phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Same
that,
thing with training, right? Like
right.
the training
Totally.
department, that it's viewed or treated as an expense until you don't have the people and you start under delivering.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is for me, even as a business owner, I really didn't execute the lesson I learned. I read about it, you know, all these other things, but it really wasn't until end of last year where we hired a EVP that has experience in the industry to run the division, to
Mm,
allow myself to have the time to think about what are we really doing here and what is we need to be able to, and a lot of owners obviously get so used to growing it and being in the middle of everything.
yeah.
But pretty soon, like you said, going from that 1 to 5 million, 5 to 10 million, the owner actually ends up being the biggest
The
liability or
problem.
bottleneck
Yep.
if they're not able to get out of their own way, because in their mind they've just got everything on their shoulders. And so the organizations obviously that move beyond tradition, you know, if you have a desire to grow beyond being a mom and pop shop, you know, what got you even to that first milestone is not going to get you to the next one. If anything, you'll actually be the detractor from it. So
100%.
self-awareness in that capacity is a big thing of being like, you just got to step aside and let people, you know,
Yeah.
take over almost, you know,
The,
with
you
your
know,
direction.
something that I'm working on because I've seen this happen so many times. And, you know, I get paid to help people deal with that. Right. Uh, but I'm also growing my business. and I don't intend to just be a one-man show. Right. Um, now, so I need to start developing the skill set to strategically outsource different elements of my work. Because at some point, I don't want to be like doing the button pushing and programming and course creation. Because I don't like that. And
Yeah.
so here, like, so how am I getting the practice of learning how to scale my organization right now, even though there's no need for it? What I'm starting to do is figure out how to outsource the stuff I don't like doing.
Right.
And
Right.
that gives me, to your point, that gives me more thinking time to say, okay, I'm going to create this course and I've got an email sequence and okay, how did I do that? so that I can walk somebody through it in the future and say, this is how I'd like for you to do it. This is the idea. Go do the button pushing, because I don't like that. I'm pretty good at ideas. And that removes me from being the constraint. And I think as individuals, we can totally apply that. What are the things I don't like to do? I don't like going to the grocery store and standing in line and listening to kids cry. I really don't. How can I outsource that? There's all kinds of
You
services.
hate kids. You had Jesse Hernandez hates you.
Right? Like, you can outsource that.
Canceled. Everyone loves babies. No.
Yeah. So there you go. Sorry, I went off on a rant, but yeah, like, scale, outsource the stuff you don't like so that you can scale. Done.
Exactly. Earlier you talked about being able to do things that really move the needle, right?
Yeah.
And foremen, superintendents get caught up with daily minutia that take away from actually production tasks that can move the project forward, because they're dealing with so much other BS on a regular basis. And if they can have more support, right, they have those tools to understand how to be more efficient. Very similar to what, I think that is such an important piece that you just said, just because of the fact that that is the core of everybody. If you're not where you want to be, focus, look at your time. Where are you spending it? Are you, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a professional, whatever, a salesperson, same thing, had this conversation the other day. Salespeople, our sales team, we want you to be focused on revenue generating activities. If there's other things that are getting in the way, you need to raise your hand and say, this thing's taking up my time. Just make sure this is where you want me to spend my time. That means we need a better CRM with an app that we can upload business cards. Do it. If we need whatever. But at the end of the day, if you look at your course of your day, if someone's not meeting their numbers, how much time are you spending over the course of a day focused on meeting your numbers and doing things that will help you meet your numbers? And if there's a breakdown right there, that's a good place to start right out of the gate, right? Business owners, same thing. So, Jesse, I know we're coming up on time here, so really excited about your toolbox. Talk to us a little bit about that and where we can find that, where our audience can find that. And we'll obviously post a link at the bottom to it as well. But where can we find, obviously we know where to find you, but for those that may not, tell us about where we can find you and the toolbox and everything else, so that we can get this thing launched the right way.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So first, it was like the thing was launched specifically for this, like created so that I could launch this with you and to your people, to your community. Awesome. And so right now there's a early adopter rate. What that means is the price is going to go up, but not yet. So the way to find the Field Leaders Planning Toolbox is to go to deftbuilder.com/planning toolbox. And but maybe I'll drop a link in the chat after we get off. And go through the thing, do all the clicking, sign up, and boom, you could start taking the course right now. My website is depthbuilder.com. You can find all kinds of other stuff, all my socials, etc. But this planning toolbox, man, I'm super excited about it. One, because I've gotten pretty good feedback. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. And I think it can help some people. And I think it's a start of something big. Oh, there you go. You just threw it in there. Bam.
It's not my first live stream.
Nik's got skills, baby. Watch out. So and again, like the best way, if you're ever trying to find out if I'm working or if I'm slacking off, just go to LinkedIn. You can search Jesse Depth Builder, and that'll pull me up. Because I kind of live on LinkedIn, you know this, right? Like I'm always interacting, I'm always posting. I play around on the other socials, but LinkedIn is like home for me. The rest of the stuff is like the playground and the gym. I just kind of stop by every now and then.
Yeah, nice. That's great. No, so like I said, posted that link, and then in the replay of it, we'll also post that link as well. And we appreciate you making a special deal for our audience. So we're definitely going to get that into our stratosphere with all the foremen, superintendents, and project teams that we have that we represent, and really excited to get that out to market. So, Jesse, I feel like we're going to have another one of these sessions 60, 90 days from now. Hopefully you're not too LinkedIn famous for us at that point, but really appreciate it. Key takeaways, Jesse, if you had to leave everyone with one last quote, message, whatever it might be, floor is yours.
Yeah, man, here's the message. And it's, be kind to yourself. Give yourself permission to heal, to recuperate, and to spend some alone time with your thoughts. That's the message.
Powerful, for sure, especially starting off beginning of the year. We all have hopes and dreams. We're going to make some great things happen, but that being kind to yourself is a big part in understanding that things come along. So really appreciate that. Thanks again, Jesse. Really appreciate you kind of making everything happen, getting everything together, and then publishing it today. So really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.
Cool. Peace.